All right, so clearly conference realignment drama isn't going away anytime soon. As a matter of fact, it's probably going to get a whole lot crazier before it gets better. And Florida State fans have seen that up close and personal over the last few weeks. Now, there's a lot going on here, and we even got a couple clips to play for you guys, and then we'll get into the discussion. But first, I got to ask that if you love Florida State football, if you love following your favorite team both on and off the field, we ask that you consider subscribing to the channel. We jump on here multiple times a week to talk recruiting, conference realignment drama, hot takes from the media, just about anything and everything we can. And YouTube tells us that over 80% of you guys that are watching aren't yet subscribed. So definitely hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. Let's go ahead and roll the clips.
I pay attention. As I said, we're focused on our 16. I've said before at media days, I'm not a recruiter. My job is to make sure we meet the standard of excellence that we have for ourselves on a daily basis. That attracts interest. It's done that with the two universities that we've added this year. They're not the only phone calls I've ever had, but I'm not involved in recruitment. Our presidents have been clear that I am not going to entangle us in litigation around expansion. And so I pay attention, but I'm not engaged in those conversations.
You're skipping just a few steps. They haven't taken any schools yet, and I'm not convinced, Bash, that they will really want Florida State. I know Florida State thinks they're heavily in demand, but there's some question about exactly what they bring to the Big 10. They don't fit the Big 10 model. The Big 10, I believe, other than Nebraska, has highly accredited schools, and I don't think Florida State really qualifies for that.
Not 80%, not 90%, but 100% of everyone I talk to, and we're talking about university presidents, conference personnel, athletic directors, consultants, network executives, 100% said the Big 10 doesn't want Florida State or Clemson, and certainly the SEC doesn't want Florida State or Clemson. I talked to 3 SEC presidents point blank. I asked them, and they said, no, we have no interest in Florida State. They've got Florida and South Carolina in those 2 states. They don't need to add 2 other schools. So they're disruptive. They're not a good partner. You don't want to bring that school to your conference if you think that.
Now, you may listen to all that and go, ouch. That doesn't really sound great for Florida State getting out of the ACC anytime soon, and definitely doesn't sound like they're going to go to a better conference. Now, before you go freaking out, before you go convincing yourself that we're doomed to end up in the Big 12, I want to remind everybody to stay calm and just remember the politics that are in play here. Now, I'm also just going to go on the record and say that Paul Feinbaum is an absolute clown. But I think the SEC and the Big 10 are still very much in play here. Sure, call me delusional. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of Miami fans and Ohio State fans in the comments arguing with me, but you cannot convince me that the Big 10 wanted Cal and not Florida State or Clemson. Now, that alone should be enough to keep this argument alive for everybody. But let's not forget how quickly this changes. Let's not forget that Oklahoma and Texas looked dead in the water until it basically changed overnight and boom, they were in the SEC. Let's not forget that like 18 months ago, the Big Ten swore they had no interest in adding Oregon or Washington. Now today, the Pac-12 is closed and those teams are now wearing the Big Ten badge. All this to say, just like in real world politics, never take anything they say at surface value and never say never. The door is always, always open. You may have even caught it at the end of Sankey's speech there. It's not the only calls I've gotten after acknowledging that he is, in fact, paying attention to what's going on in the ACC right now. So, of course, he has to be as plain and diplomatic as possible to avoid a lawsuit. If he was actively recruiting Florida State and Clemson right now, it would leave him and the SEC open to all kinds of litigation and potential lawsuits because the ACC would likely fold and would absolutely sue as many people as they possibly could on their way out. Now, Greg Sankey's a smart man, and he's done well leading that conference. It's why they're one of the Power 2. He's not going to leave them liable for anything. Now, you've also heard that the SEC wouldn't want Florida State or Clemson because they already have those markets with Florida and South Carolina. 2 programs that are near the bottom of that conference right now, by the way. But I've always thought that was such a dumb argument anyways. The SEC has Ole Miss and Mississippi State, Alabama and Auburn, Tennessee and Vandy. They had Texas A&M and still made it a point to go get Texas. So I'm just not buying that the SEC isn't interested just because they already have a program in said state. Now I have to even acknowledge Paul Feinbaum's comments here, especially because he's incredible about flipping his opinions back and forth on this subject. Just a few months ago, he was quoted saying that the SEC makes perfect sense for Florida State, that Clemson and Florida State are 2 perfect fits in the SEC. Now it's no one wants us. And to say that Florida State doesn't bring value to the Big Ten is the most atrocious thing I've ever heard. The Big Ten is going after brands right now, but they're clearly looking to expand geographically and make it a true coast-to-coast conference. Adding Florida State would give them access to a region that they've never had, with two programs that could immediately compete in that conference. Now, like Feinbaum, some people love to chime in with the whole AAU thing. Now, for starters, Florida State is very close to gaining AAU membership anyways. They're having a Board of Trustees meeting this month, and that is one of the things listed on their agenda. But also, Nebraska isn't AAU either, and they're still in. I've also just never bought that it was a true deal breaker. You can't tell me that adding Florida State, at least a fringe AAU school for now, would really diminish the public perception of your conference, especially if Florida State is bringing in viewers, competition, and great games. I just don't feel like it would end up mattering that much at all. Now, maybe the most troubling thing we heard here is Brett McMurphy saying that not 80, not 90, but 100% of the people he's talked to say that the Big Ten isn't interested in Florida State, after saying just 3 weeks ago, by the way, that Florida State and Clemson were both bound for the Big Ten, claiming that he's heard that Florida State has been a disruptive partner. Whatever that's supposed to mean, I don't know, because Florida State literally has no choice here. And if you ask me, they've spent years trying to figure this out with the ACC. They not only refuse to do unequal revenue sharing, but they've now also added more teams just to further dilute the existing ACC schools. So for Florida State to be expected to compete with LSU, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, etc., how can you ask them to do so while essentially making half the revenue and having half the resources? Florida State has no choice but to do it this way. They belong in a premier conference and know they shouldn't be making the same amount of money as a Wake Forest or a Virginia. You got to remember that when this all comes out, all this negative recruiting, again, don't take it at surface value. There are absolutely conversations being had, probably negotiating behind closed doors as we speak. If it were as simple as the SEC and Big Ten have zero interest in Florida State, then this whole situation wouldn't have continued to be discussed so much for over a year now. Again, there's definitely interest and there's absolutely numbers being talked about. Again, Florida State is bringing in somewhere around 40 to 45 million in revenue each year, where most SEC or Big Ten schools are doing almost double that. So obviously, even bumping up to 50 or 60 million is a big leap for Florida State. So of course, the Big Ten or SEC isn't going to come out the gate trying to offer a full share. They're going to try to obtain Florida State at a discount, at least initially. So this disruptive partner talk is just a smokescreen to try to get Florida State at a lower price. And that's really the whole name of the game here. Avoid getting sued and make your moves as cheaply as you can. And who can blame them, really? I can't. And who can blame Florida State for trying to get as much money as they can? But don't think for a second that either conference wouldn't benefit from adding a Florida State or a Clemson, especially if they could add both and get the rivalry game on their schedule. I think both conferences are still very much in play. I do still tend to lean towards thinking that Florida State ends up in the Big Ten, probably with Clemson as well. But as you guys can tell, this whole thing is taking twists and turns every day, it seems like, and I don't think the roller coaster is done quite yet. This will probably be a scenario very similar to Oklahoma and Texas, right, where it just gets announced out of the blue and catches everybody off guard. But I still think it's a matter of when, not if, Florida State ends up in one of the big two conferences. And let me know down in the comments which one you think is more likely or which one you'd prefer out of the SEC or the Big Ten. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully this video eased some of your concerns. If you enjoyed the content, definitely drop a like on the video and consider subscribing. Working on our goal of hitting 1,000 subs by kickoff in Ireland next month. But we need your help, and it definitely means a lot. We'll be back with more updates very soon. I hope to catch you guys on the next one. Go Noles.